Hey guys, it's Brett Williams here to run you through a demo of Quick List. Quick List is a list building toolkit for Final Cut Pro that features quick lists, title plugins that allow you to design, animate, and time your animation, all with a single title plugin, auto-sizing titles you can add to your list for a little more style that automatically scale the animation and elements to your text size, and background effects, which include overlays and revealers to draw attention to your list and or make it easier to read. Let's start by exploring the controls and options of a quick list as we build an animated list of constellations against this night sky footage I have here in my timeline. After installation, you'll find the quick list set of titles in the Titles browser under BretFX Quick List. Here you have single and dual column quick lists, background effects, overlays and revealers, auto-sizing titles, and finally, presets that correlate to all the looks and examples that you may have seen in the trailer. In this tutorial, we'll be using the Quick List Custom title. Why use the Custom instead of the regular Quick List plugin? The Custom version has more controls for the animation and is a sort of DIY solution, while the regular Quick List plugin is truly quick to use with a number of presets for the in and out animation. Everything else, the timing controls, etc. are the same. The 60 refers to the maximum length of your list in seconds, so a 180 can be up to 3 minutes long. You'll also find dual column titles, which have 2 5-line text fields instead of 1 10-line text field. But beyond that, the functionality is the same. So let's drag the single column custom quick list to the timeline. You'll notice it's really long. It has to come into the timeline at its maximum length. But we can now shorten it up to the length of our night sky clip here, and it won't affect the animation or timing. Right off the bat, you'll see we already have the maximum 10 lines of text. One of the main benefits of Quick List is you can edit and animate and stylize all these together in the same plugin in a single text field. So with our Quick List selected in the timeline, I can start entering my list right here in the inspector. Press Command 4 if your inspector is not open. Or I could also copy and paste text from an email, a script, or any other document. And with that said, I've already got the text right here in TextEdit, ready to copy and paste. So from here, we'll select all the text and switch over to the Final Cut Pro Text Inspector. That's the second tab here in the inspector, the one with the little paragraph lines. I can change the font globally or selectively, but I think I'll leave it at Proxima Nova for this example. Proxima Nova has a lot of weights and variants, so I'll change the headline to extra bold and the rest of the list to light. That'll give us some contrast. I'll also make the list smaller, and I'll make everything left aligned. And now we can move the whole list over to the left by simply clicking on it in the viewer and dragging it to the left. Now with all the text in the list selected, I'll add some spacing between the line items. After that, maybe I'll select the title here and scroll down to the face parameter. Click on Show. Why do you hide this apple? I have no idea. Click on the color swatch and let's change it to yellow. All this stylizing can of course easily be changed at any time, even after we've set up all our animation and timing. Alright, so let's jump back into the title inspector, the big T here, the main controls for the plugin. Below the text entry field, you see some global controls. You shouldn't really need these for placement, as you can just move the text as we just did with your mouse in the viewer. But you may have designed your list and you're happy with the proportions and the spacing, or you want to scale and rotate the list as a whole. You can even add some shear here, that is to skew the list one way or the other. Alright, so now let's move on to the animation start section where we can mix and match different parameters to precisely control how our lines of our list animate in. These sliders will determine the start point of our list. As you can see, they're all set to 0 and the list just fades in. So let's move the playhead to the start, and we're going to deselect the fade in parameter. Now this animation anchor, we'll take a look at that in a minute. It kind of determines if the rotations, the scales, and other transformations animate as characters, words, or as a whole line. For now, we'll just leave it at line. All right, so with our playhead at the start of our title, let's start creating our animation. Maybe we want the lines to scale down, so let's increase the size, as this is the start, and so we want it to start larger. And we'll have a move in from the right as well. So let's move the horizontal slider to the right. I don't think we need to adjust the vertical, but it would be fun to add a little bit of rotation. We could add some flip or spin, but that's just getting too crazy. I do like to add some tracking though, to have some of the letters start out, spread out and come together though. So let's do that. Now below we have some blur controls. If your animation is fully horizontal, like left to right, then adding a bit of horizontal blur does a great job of emulating some motion blur. And the same goes if your animation is purely vertical. But we're going to add a little bit of both, so it's more just kind of an out of focus aesthetic choice, kind of like as if the animation is coming from behind the camera, and landing on the canvas in front of us. Now, it looks a little bit wild at the moment because we're seeing all the lines. So let's turn that fade in checkbox back on. And let's play what we've got. That's pretty cool. I like it. This is a good point to look at the animation anchor. When it's set to line, as it is here, the transformations like size and rotation happen to the line as a whole. If we switch it to word, and let's turn off the blur here so we can really see what's going on. You can see that the rotation is happening independently, but simultaneously to each word in the line. It's even a bit more apparent if you switch it to character. And switching it to all looks a lot like line, but the anchor point that they're all rotating and scaling around is in the center of the entire list, not each line or each word. So play with the options and see what you like. I think we'll just keep it at line, and let's turn the blur back on. All right, moving on, let's take a look at the timing section. This is truly unique to Quick List. This is where we'll synchronize our animation to our audio, or just have greater control over the timing of each line for any purpose we choose, I guess. Each slider lets you specify the amount of delay before each line animates in. And it's worth noting that they can be in any order. For this exercise, I'm going to set them all to the maximum delay so it won't be so visually confusing seeing them all on the screen out of order as we set the timing. So line 1 is our title. We'll just leave that at 0. I don't actually have any VO for this demonstration, but let's just say that the host gives a few seconds of intro. So we'll make line 2 come in at about 3 seconds. You could enter the number 3 if you know the timing, but more often than not, you'll probably just stop the playhead at a spot like here and adjust the sliders until it starts to animate in. I mean, who wants to do math? And so there's not a lot of space here for the sliders, so it's a lot easier if we widen the inspector as far as it'll go. Now I can adjust the slider until it starts to animate in with a lot more granularity. And so maybe the host talks about that for a second or two, and then we can adjust line 3 here. And maybe the next few are listed really quick, one right after the other. And then maybe there's a pause. And another one comes in, and so on. It's really that simple. And if you re-record your VO or need to change timing, just adjust a few sliders. And the same holds true if you need to change the animation style. Just change one title, not 10. You can globally make changes to font spacing, alignment, animation, all in one plugin, not potentially 10, like other solutions or methods might require. Quick to animate, quick to time, and really quick to make changes at a later date. Now that we've animated in and set our timing, we need to animate the list off the screen. That's what this last timing slider is. Let's say we're done with our list at about 18 or 19 seconds in here, and we need it to animate off the screen. We'll slide this to that point, and you can see it start to fade out, top to bottom. You can't control the independent timing of each line for the out animation, but I think that would just get a little bit cumbersome to have all that built in. You're not usually going to animate each line out at a separate moment. You're usually going to animate the whole list out as a whole. But you can control the sequencing and the style, and that's all in this next section, Animate End. Since we're setting up the parameters for the end animation, let's move forward until the lines have faded out. I'm going to shrink the inspector back down to where it was. And now let's uncheck the fade out checkbox. You'll also see here we have the same anchor controls, but also a new direction control. This determines the order the lines animate out. Forward is lines 1 through 10, backwards 10 through 1. Center to ends would be like 5 and 6 to 1 and to 10. And the reverse would hold true for ends to center, like 10 and 1 and then 9 and 2, and you get the idea. You can also choose random, which is pretty self-explanatory. Great if you want a whole bunch of lines to, fly forward randomly or, spin kind of almost explosion-like. The spread control determines how many lines are moving at a time. If you set it to 1, each line will animate off before the next one even starts moving. So line 1 flies off, then line 2. If you set it to something like 3 or 4, after a little bit of movement of line 1, line 2 will start to move, and after that moves a little bit, line 3. So a maximum of like 3 or 4 lines at once will be moving. The farther you push this slider, the more it'll look like they're just all moving in unison. And you could enter 10,000 or something as the spread, and they would move in unison. So maybe for this, we'll just leave it at 10. So I think this time I want the lines to drop down off the screen. We'll have to change the direction parameter to backward so that the 10th line drops off first, and then the 9th and the 8th, and so on. So I'll move this vertical slider left to make the text drop down, and I'll add a little bit of a flip as well. Now let's turn back on the fade checkbox, back up the playhead, and let's take a look. Perfect, I'm happy with that. There's one more animation section to look at, constant motion. This is your sort of Ken Burns pan and zoom. You can add to the entire composition or animation. So let's have it scale up a bit and rotate. With the playhead here toward the end, I'll adjust the size and the rotation. And let's move it a bit to the right with the horizontal slider. And we'll make a little vertical adjustment as well. And there you go. Let's play that back. See, that gives us a little bit of constant rotation and scale. And actually a little bit tough to see over a 20-second period. So if we scrub through this, it's a little more obvious. So that's really about it for the Quick List plugin. The dual column versions operate the same, except you have 2 separate 5-line lists. Great for pros and cons, that sort of thing. Beyond that, the animation, the timing, the functionality, it all works the same. If you don't like setting up your in and out animation yourself, the standard non-custom Quick List plugins, they work the same, but instead of all the sliders to create exactly the animation you want, you're presented with a number of pre-made choices that may or may not fit your needs. If they do, it's an even quicker solution. So I know our list shows up pretty good against this dark background, but in the next video, we'll take a look at adding background effects to make our list even easier to read.